All right, everybody, I am back with a brand new DC update. And boy, we're going to look at something very interesting today. The official numbers for the projections on what Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom and what that movie is going to do at theaters have been released. And we're going to look at what those projections are. I'm going to talk about that versus what the reality of the situation is. And we're going to talk about why Warner Brothers is in this position to begin with. So let's take a look at some of the photos that I have grabbed. So today is going to be Aquaman 2 heavy. And there was a couple of people who posted online when they went to the movies this last week, like I did to see Napoleon, and the trailer came out for Aquaman 2. Nobody said anything. It was completely silent. And it says here that just saw a theater response about how people reacted to the trailer of Aquaman 2. DC movies have become a joke among audiences. And they have. They absolutely have, and we're going to talk about why here in a little bit. Where are all the real DC fans now who asked for cringe comedies like Shazam, The Suicide Squad, and Birds of Prey? You guys got what you wanted. And he's absolutely right. This is what people asked for, and now they're not going to the movies. And it looks like James Gunn is going to continue with this brand, this type of film, and it's not what anybody asked for. But let's take a look at what else I've grabbed. Here was the post that kind of prompted all of this. And someone said, just left Napoleon. I'll share my thoughts later, but just wanted to quickly come here to say something that happened during the trailers before it that is an example of the current state of the DCEU between general audiences. The trailer of Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom was the last to play. It was in my theater as well. When the trailer finished, inviting audiences to watch it in IMAX on December 22nd, someone in the audience said out loud, "Nope," and many people laughed at it and even agreed. It's sad to see how the DC brand became a literal joke between casuals. The WB marketing team will have to work overtime to convince audiences to see this film. They have just 1 month to try and turn this tide. And it's not going to change. And we're going to talk about why this actually happened here in a few minutes. Now, this is pretty crazy. This is something that co-head of DC Films, Peter Safran, said when he was talking about the DC brand back in 2018, so 5 years ago. He said, "From my perspective, Shazam represents the next step in the evolution of the DC brand. You had Wonder Woman, then Aquaman, coming December 21st, is another big step. Then comes Shazam, all different movies, but all have a unique tone that moves away from the darkness of the prior DC movies. He's trying to do the same thing again. What could go wrong?" So what's happened since they changed from that darker look of the previous DC movies? All of the movies have tanked. They started to come back with Black Adam. But then when there was this big announcement of a reboot, people stopped going. They just don't care anymore. The only movies that are doing well for DC as a brand are the darker films like the Joker and the Batman. And even the Batman didn't do all that well. I mean, when you look at what some of these other films have done, Man of Steel, Batman vs. Superman, Aquaman, the Batman really didn't do all that well. And when you account for inflation, it really didn't do that well. It did well. It made money for the studio because they had a small budget. But as far as getting people into the seats, not as good. But people definitely went to the Joker. The point is, they're going to the darker films. They don't care about these comedies. They just don't. So here's the big story of what I wanted to talk about in today's video. And I still have a few other things, but this is what I wanted to look at because it came up next in the slides here. Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom and migration. So they have the link to the full forecast, but it says the long-range box office forecast, and this was on 11/24 of 23, for Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, coming out on December 22nd, 2023. Obviously, Warner Brothers Pictures Studio. The opening forecast range domestically is $32 million to $42 million. The domestic total forecast range, $105 million to $168 million. I think this is generous, guys, especially on that opening forecast. I don't think it's going to make $32 to $42 million. I really don't. I'm guessing it's going to be under that. If you remembered with The Flash that came out a while back, they kept revising that up until the release, and it did even worse than what they had expected. And I do believe that this is going to do worse as well. Nobody cares anymore. Nobody freaking cares. And all these stupid people out there who said, you're not a true DC fan. We're the ones that still go to the theater. It's all the other people that don't. All the ones that wanted this to happen. They're the ones that are not going to the theater. It's pretty crazy. And this slide is a reminder of what we had back in 2016. This is from the actual official Batman vs. Superman Twitter account. Thank you for making Batman vs. Superman the #1 movie in the world. We go from that to what we have today. And I want you to see in this picture, and I'm glad that this is the picture that they used for this post, because this is the first time we ever saw the Trinity in live action on film together. We will probably never see this again. And it's sad. Man of Steel never got a sequel. We never had the standalone Batman film. Wonder Woman 3, that was going to feature Batman, got canceled. It's really sad to see what the studio did. We had it all right there in the palm of our hands, and the studio's knee-jerk reaction ruined everything. Now, this goes back to what I talked about before. If you talk about inflation and what Man of Steel, it came out 10 years ago, and what it made, Man of Steel made $667 million. If you account for inflation, that's over $900 million today. That movie made over $900 million. How crazy is that? The Batman didn't even come close to that. And so this goes to show you that fewer people are going to the theaters to see these films. And there's a reason. I'm going to talk about that at the very end of my video. So this was just posted yesterday, and it says, I'm hearing that Warner Brothers Pictures investors are not pleased with apparent promises that were made on the 2023 DC films. Sources are saying tempers are high, and there was even some yelling on conference calls because of many underwhelming IPs, specifically DC. And it's not just DC. We also had the last Harry Potter film failed miserably at the theater. I haven't even seen it yet. I saw the first two, but I haven't seen the newest one, the Fantastic Beasts movies. And they're fumbling. It's like nobody cares anymore. This is also something that was interesting. This came out, and this was in regards to Superman and Lois. So the show, Superman and Lois on TV, which is really good, especially that first season was awesome. But the pilot director, Lee Toland Krieger, explained why he loves Zack Snyder's Man of Steel, how it influenced the show. He says, I admit I'm a fan of Man of Steel, more than maybe most people. I think if you go back and watch that movie now, a lot of it holds up really beautifully. I think the third act of that movie maybe falls victim to a lot of giant tentpole movies fall victim to, which is kind of the, okay, now the world is being destroyed and we have to save the whole planet from imminent destruction. And that's always just a tough place to go and make it still feel intimate. But the intimate moments of that movie, I think, are really beautiful. We certainly looked at, in particular, the movie Suit. The suit, obviously, is a great-looking suit, despite people thinking it was somewhat heretical to lose the underpants. I think now it sort of seems like the gold standard. Certainly the cape action, a lot of the practical cape and digitally rendered versions of the cape work was something I don't think I fully appreciated until we were in the weeds of it. But it is really wonderful and lends itself to some of those more heroic moments. People like Man of Steel. Man of Steel holds up better today. If it came out today, it would be a much bigger hit than when it came out 10 years ago. People were afraid to go back. It was kind of like what happened with Batman Begins versus The Dark Knight, the second one, how the second one made way more than Batman Begins did. It was the same thing. We came off of the Superman Returns film and people were wondering what they were going to see. And had they done a Man of Steel 2, guaranteed billion-dollar film. There's no question about it. And we're still going to talk about why Black Adam did better. So let's get on to that conversation. It is a fact that after Aquaman came out, Aquaman was the most viewed people in the seats film for DC Studios in a very long time. And after that, the movies took a sharp turn down when they started going to these goofy comedies. Like Peter Safran said, they started to go to Shazam, Birds of Prey. Nobody cared about those movies. People did not like the tone change. They wanted more of what we got through Aquaman. And, a lot of people say there was some too much humor in the first Aquaman movie. I don't think so. I thought that movie was a perfect blend of action, seriousness, and also there was a little bit of comedy in there. But it wasn't a straight-up comedy like The Flash was, or Shazam 2, or Blue Beetle. These movies are straight-up comedies, and people just are not digging that when it comes to superhero films. Now, I made a comment on Twitter, and people got all after me saying, I don't like comedy. I do enjoy comedy if it's billed as a comedy. Superheroes, to me, are not comedies. I don't want to go see a superhero film that is comedy unless you're doing something like Deadpool. That is not what DC is. It's not what these characters represent, and I want to see them in their true, full glory. We're probably never going to see that. That picture I showed of the Trinity, we're probably never going to get that again. James Gunn is hell-bent on just throwing a bazillion characters into his films, and we're never going to see the Trinity again. We're probably never going to get a Batman-Superman film ever again. Ever again. They're going to throw in all these weird characters and do things that nobody asked for. So after Aquaman, things tanked. The only time people started to come back to the theaters, well, you had the Batman, but then you had Black Adam. The Batman was not part of the DCEU, but Black Adam was. The Rock was out there talking about his movie and how he wanted to get this back to its former glory and bring the DCEU back. And sure, people went to see that. In fact, it was The Rock's biggest opening weekend ever on a movie. And it was announced that Henry Cavill was back as Superman, especially at the end of that movie. They had Henry Cavill go out on the circuit and talk about coming back. And if people are patient, his video's still out there. If you're patient, good things are coming. We were going to get Man of Steel too. We were going to see this heroic Superman. And then what happens? Black Adam made like $600 million worldwide, and it didn't even get two of the biggest releases overseas. And Warner Brothers calls that a failure. And yeah, the movie had a pretty big budget because they kept toying with it. But at the end of the day, after it came out on video, it actually profited and it made money. In fact, it sold like crazy on video, and it did extremely well on streaming. People were interested in that movie. They were interested in the DCEU. And what do? Knee-jerk reaction. Then they have nothing but comedies come out. James Gunn comes out, announces his reboot, and that's when everything became irrelevant. And you saw ticket sales take a nosedive. So for people who say James Gunn hasn't done a damn thing yet for DC Studios, he's got his Peacemaker's part of it. His Suicide Squad is part of it. I've already seen those projects. I don't want any part of James Gunn. And if you don't think his announcement has a factor in this, you don't understand business. You don't understand business at all. The studio, what's really irritating, I was thinking about this earlier, is we were going to have Gal Gadot, Ben Affleck, and Henry Cavill in a bunch of scenes in Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom, more in The Flash. Batman was supposedly going to be in Blue Beetle. And what did the studio do? They nixed it all. They just nixed it all. And James Gunn's reasoning behind cutting those scenes out was he didn't want to give the audience hope on something that was never going to happen. Well, if you're rebooting, what does it matter? Give the current fans that love this stuff the ability to see their heroes again. Instead, you come in and say, no, we're cutting all that stuff. We don't want to promise something that's not coming. You already made that promise when you announced the freaking reboot with 3 other films that still needed to be released. Shazam, The Flash. Well, there were 4 films at the time. There was Shazam, there was The Flash, there was Blue Beetle, and Aquaman. You announced a reboot before 4 films were coming out. And you don't think there's going to be backlash because of that? You are sadly mistaken. That's business. That's business 101. What they did, I can't even, it's disgusting. This is Warner Brothers. It's what they've always been. I do think Aquaman and the Lost Kingdom is going to do worse than the projections. I also think Superman Legacy is going to make nowhere near the money that the Batman, the Joker, or even Black Adam made. I just don't think it's going to, and I don't think it's going to come anywhere near what Man of Steel made. When people go in and see that it's a different person, unless it's like the best movie in the world, Like, it's the most important superhero film ever released. And if he doesn't nail it, it's game over. And they'll probably bury these heroes for a long time. We had it all in the palm of our hands, and Warner Brothers just screwed the fans over. And what's crazy about this is it looks like they're going back to what they had planned long before James Gunn took over. It's like they just let him take over, and they're just said, okay, we're going to implement the plan we had before Pam Abdy and Mike DeLuca decided to change things and give the fans what they actually wanted. We're going to go back to the original plan. It's just ridiculous. The whole thing's ridiculous. I'm thankful for Pam Abdy and Mike DeLuca for doing what they did to bring Henry Cavill back for a few seconds and, for bringing Ben Affleck back and getting him back in the saddle for stuff. I just really wish we could see the rest of it. So, screw Warner Brothers. I hope they fail. All right, guys, that's my video for the day. I do appreciate the support. We'll be back when I, probably tomorrow or the next day with more DC information. I do appreciate all the support. If you like the video, please hit that like button, subscribe, and hit that notification bell. We'll see you on the next video.